In recent videos, I've gone over two of the most influential groups of dark side adepts trained by the Emperor and Darth Vader. These were the Emperor's Hands and the Inquisitors. But these were far from the only Force users in the Empire, and today we're going to talk about a grab bag of 5 of the other most powerful or influential Force users, or at least latent Force sensitives, who don't quite fit into the other categories we've covered so far, or which we'll cover in the future. After all, the Empire was absolutely riddled with these guys. First, we have Carnor Jax. Carnor was a member of Palpatine's Royal Guard, but he wasn't just any Royal Guard. He was one of the elite, called the Sovereign Protectors. These were formed out of 2 primary motivations. One was described this way in the Dark Empire sourcebook, quote, "By setting nearly unattainable goals and watching his men struggle to achieve them, he, Palpatine, can keep them under better control. By creating higher and higher circles of elite status, it motivates them all to push themselves constantly," end quote. The second motivation was because he probably got bored sometimes and wanted to break out his thesaurus, because what is a Sovereign Protector if not just a fancier way to say Royal Guard? Carnor was born to a warrior of the Sun Guard of Thyrsis, an elite mercenary group with a history of serving the Sith. His father was executed by Palpatine for failing to recover the holocron of King Addis, but Carnor managed to climb the ranks of the Empire nonetheless, progressing from Stormtrooper to Royal Guard member to Sovereign Protector. Where others, like Hyrcanos, balked at the inhumanity of some of the training they were subjected to, including Vader killing one of their cohort in a display of power, Carnor, still unaware of his own Force potential, was unperturbed and instead decided to like this video and subscribe for more. After Palpatine's death, many of the Royal Guards joined various Force cults, promising the Emperor's return, or, keeping in mind the potential demonetization, sent themselves to live on a farm. Carnor was disgusted by the blind loyalty of the other guards and their behavior in the wake of Palpatine's death. His sense of self-preservation and his desire for his own power allowed him to more easily shift his allegiance to Grand Vizier Sate Pestage, who took over after Palpatine, and then to Asan Isard, who presented him with a new opportunity. The Dark Lady Lumaya, who we covered in the Emperor's Hand video, requested Isard send her some royal guards, and Carnor was among those sent. She recognized his Force potential and trained him as her Sith apprentice, having assumed the mantle of Dark Lady of the Sith herself, somewhat contestedly given that Palpatine was in fact still alive, a possibility that Lumaya herself seemed to allude to her newfound apprentice. Lumaya tried to emphasize the importance of reinstating the Sith Order in their short time together, before she disappeared herself and was assumed dead even by the Empire. Jax followed her instructions, infiltrating the upper levels of the Empire, befriending and blackmailing ruling council members, while also forming an important alliance with another Force user, Sarkev Quest, another former Emperor's Hand, who remained a member of the Imperial Court. On top of the political and military access offered by Quest, who thought Jax was a prime candidate to take over as the Empire's Supreme Commander, he and other dark-side adepts continued Jax's Force training. 6 years after the supposed death of Palpatine, the Emperor returned and threatened to upend Jax's ambitions. Jax retook his position as Palpatine's guard, but alongside Sarkev Quest and other co-conspirators on the ruling council, not to mention Palpatine's own doctor, Jax was able to poison several of the Emperor's cloned bodies, which the Emperor burned through at an alarming rate. When Palpatine finally died for real, Jax became the new ruler of the still-fractured Empire. He was in the process of trying to lure Lumaya back, hoping to kill her, when he himself was killed by another guard, Hyrcanos. This left Lumaya still in hiding, believing she was the sole inheritor of the Sith traditions. The next pair we'll talk about were close advisors to Palpatine, and were more powerful as political forces than as Force users, although they were still Force-sensitive. First, we have Sim Alu, who has a slightly different story in the new canon, but in Legends he was born on Coruscant, and he became an important political ally of Palpatine even before his rise to the position of Supreme Chancellor. During the Clone Wars and subsequent reformation of the Republic into the Empire, Alu was involved in stymieing the attempts from various senators to oppose Palpatine's plans. While he never took part in the usual acrobatics and lightsaber duels we associate with Force users, Alu did receive at least some level of training in using the dark side of the Force. Also in this vein, we have Janus Grijatis, another member of Palpatine's Funny Hat Club and inner circle of political advisors. Grijatis, who grew up on Chommel Minor in Palpatine's own home sector, was from a formerly wealthy family who held a grudge against the non-humans who they blamed for their decline. Janice and Palpatine were apparently friendly in their youth. Palpatine's father even hoped to send the young and troubled Palpatine to live with the Gradatis family. But this plan was foiled by Palpatine murdering the rest of his own family on the way there. Janice incorporated his father's strong humanocentric beliefs into his political positions, masked just enough to allow him some level of mainstream success before the Empire made it possible for him to take off his mask, if not his funny hat. The pair reunited later on in Palpatine's political career. Palpatine was still early in his own apprenticeship to Darth Plagueis, but he suspected Gradatis had some strength in the Force. This talent, as far as we know, remained latent throughout his life, and he never received the same training that even Alu had been given. Gradatis linked himself to Palpatine as closely as he could, becoming one of his closest advisors as Senator, and then Chancellor and Emperor. Despite his seeming loyalty to Palpatine, which had lasted his whole life, when Tarkin finished the Death Star, Gradatis was one of the strongest voices encouraging the Grand Moff to usurp the Emperor with it. When the station was destroyed, Gradatis' treachery was also discovered, but instead of killing him, Palpatine merely kept a closer eye on him. Both Gradatis and Alu were among the group of advisors on the second Death Star at Endor when it was destroyed. Our fourth Force user is Nile Declann, a future Grand Admiral who began his military service in the Clone Wars aboard an Acclamator, progressing to become a highly skilled TIE pilot under the Empire. It was this piloting skill which drew the attention of Palpatine's agents, who sought out potential Force sensitives. Their attention, on top of the opportunity it provided, left Declann with two questions. One was why the Jedi hadn't picked him up when they were around in his youth, and the other was, quote, why should he let his talents stagnate just because the Jedi were no more, end quote. Declann was sent to train under the prophets of the dark side on Dromund Kaas before being sent back to the fleet, completing his training by using the Force to execute a rebel captive. He continued to shine in his exemplary military service, ultimately being elevated to the rank of Grand Admiral along with 11 other initial candidates. After a period of operating out of Naboo, Declann was one of 4 Grand Admirals present on the second Death Star at the Battle of Endor, the others being Milton Tackle, Afshin Makati, and Oswald Teshik. Those 3 managed to flee the station before its destruction, but Declann, sensing the Emperor's own destruction, instead raced to the throne room, blowing up along the way. Our final dark side user for the day is Cedric Cagalok. Born around the conclusion of the Clone Wars, Cedric was a mercenary in his youth, and his various Force-augmented talents made him highly sought after by the Imperial military. He wasn't particularly interested in joining and was found to be, quote, insolent, insubordinate, and violently opposed to authority, according to the Dark Empire sourcebook. He was rescued from execution by the Inquisitorius, who took him to the Emperor. Palpatine simply asked one question, would you like to kill me? Palpatine understood Cedric wouldn't be able to respect anyone who he could easily kill, so Palpatine offered a duel to the youth, saying that if Cedric won, he could just kill him, and if Palpatine won, Cedric would have to serve him. Palpatine quite literally crushed him, collapsing his ribs until Cedric swore loyalty to the Emperor. For the next few years of his life, we don't have a ton of details, and it seems as if Cedric mostly just remained in training, at least until Palpatine's death at Endor, at which point Cedric fled to Biss and oversaw that world's defense. Upon Palpatine's return on Biss, the still young Cedric was placed in control of the entire Imperial military, replacing Darth Vader as Sidious's protege and the executor of Imperial forces. He was furthermore in charge of protecting the cloning vats, which, as we saw with Carnor, he didn't exactly do a great job of. Cedric did uncover the plot to destroy the Emperor's bodies, killing most of those involved, and saving one final clone body. The Emperor, reborn once again after exploding aboard the Eclipse, ordered Cedric to capture Luke Skywalker. Cedric obeyed, but found Luke in the company of several other surviving Jedi, including the Neti Jedi Ood Banar, who detonated himself, taking Cedric out with him. There's one other kind of weird note about Cedric. Wikipedia mentions him as being a descendant of Ulic Qel-Droma. This information is technically sourced, but if you try to go to the source, there's 2 notable things. One is that Executor Cedric is spelled incorrectly. The second is that this information is from the SED 1-4 section of Fact File 85, but if you open Fact File 85, this section doesn't exist. In fact, if you look at the Fact File Index, Cedric only seems to be mentioned in PAL 1-3, and the SED 1-4 entry doesn't exist at all. The misspelling is notable because I'm going to, perhaps generously, say that this means there may have been another language version of it where this fact file did exist, but as far as I can tell, both the information and the citation are just entirely made up. If you know what this may actually be in reference to, please do let me know in the comments. I would like to find and read it if it is out there. Also, let me know in the comments if there's another character not mentioned in this video you'd like to see have their own video, or another Force Weirdo branch you'd like to see covered more directly. Thank you for watching, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you next time.